Little start guide today for Tinkerlands. It's a brand new survival crafting adventure game that's out right now on Steam Early Access and hopefully coming to console in the future. It has also got a free demo if you want to go and give it a shot first. Definitely recommend checking out. It really is a great game. Feels like Corky mixed in with Terraria, Minecraft and maybe a bit of Stardew Valley. So let's go. And what can you do in the game? Well, you can play it with up to 3 of your friends, so 4 total online. It's got a massive large island to go and explore. In fact, 3 major ones plus a bunch of smaller islands to go and build your base while you gather resources and fight off enemies. With fishing, farming, cooking, sailing, navigation, lots of NPC quests, tons of NPCs in fact that you'll get to move in with you, a la like Terraria, and over 10 unique bosses in the early access launch. So first off, the game has various different biomes, and some of these biomes you're going to have a hard time surviving in unless you've got the right gear. As always in these types of games, harvest absolutely everything you come across, or try to. There will be items that you won't be able to get until you get better tools, and stick relatively close to this guide in the initial phases as she'll guide you through pretty much a little tutorial of what to craft and what you should be doing. That said, you can actually go and explore other parts of the map, and eventually you can get the guide to move in with you. The map is absolutely huge. The further south you go, you're more likely to run into the desert environments. And from my experience, the more east you go, you'll run into some of the snow biomes. And within each of these, there'll be sub-biomes that you might have to think about. The maps are procedurally generated, but they tend to have the same sort of structures in places. So you should always find caves in the snow biome, and certain NPCs will trigger more when you go into that biome, like finding the bard in the forest. And generally to the east of the spawn, bordering the desert and the forest, is where you'll find your first waypoint. It looks like the spawns are always a certain radius from spawn and roughly in the same area. Last thing to note, this is the main island. You will get maps that will take you to other places. Eventually defeating certain bosses will give you access to places like the jungle. And one slightly spoilery thing that I'm going to leave to the very end so you don't have to worry. If you actually kill a certain boss, you can get a drop of a compass that resets the whole map, and I'm presuming gives you more resources back in their locations and resets a lot of dungeons and maybe boxes of loot. So make sure you go right up to a waypoint and activate it though, and obviously you won't be able to travel to another one until you found it. There are other ways though that you'll get across the map. You'll be able to craft potions that can teleport you back to base. At the moment it doesn't seem to be too much of a penalty if you die, so don't worry too much because all of your gear will be teleported and transported back with you and doesn't seem like you lose any. Kind of hope they change this in the future to make it a little bit more challenging. There's no durability in the game either, so your weapons and gear aren't going to get needing repairs. So if you're really overloaded with stuff, simply just go ahead and die and respawn back at your base once you've got a bed down. Otherwise you should respawn somewhere near your guide if it's placed, or near the beach. You always go slower when you're going over certain terrain. If you see any paths, you'll go quicker, so try and use them as best you can. And you can actually make your own paths using dirt blocks eventually once you get a shovel. And try and kill everything that you can. Eventually when you kill enough creatures you'll unlock further info about them, which I'm pretty sure will give you info about how best to deal with them. And it's probably pretty obvious to your first moments, but yes, water is going to slow you down, as will going through certain other biomes that have got maybe more dangers. So when you go into the desert biome, unless you've got the right protection, you may start suffering and starting to lose your health, or you won't be able to see much if there's an actual sandstorm. You'll be able to eventually craft things like goggles that will help see through the storms, but until then you'll also need some protection from the heat. Once you've got the bard, one of the first NPCs that you'll come across to live with you, he can give you a 10-minute buff that protects you from the desert effects. So the best advice is to try and make yourself a first little base. Find a clearing area that you can build, and be warned that you can't build on the actual dirt paths. You'll have to dig them up and replace them with grass paths. When you chop trees down, you'll obviously get a lot of leaves, and this ends up being a better way to go ahead and build your base. Start off with an actual bush base. These bush walls will protect you just as good as wooden ones. The quicker you get some rooms up and running, the quicker you can get the NPCs to move in with you, and then that way you'll be able to do and explore and also unlock and buy stuff, as lots of them will be traders. Wooden walls and stone walls actually cost quite a fair amount of resources and trees to chop down to go ahead and make. But there's even better reason to use bush walls. Whenever you harvest any stone, wood or any structures, you've got a chance of one of these little loot goblins spawning. They'll drop coins, these are copper ones, and you may find others that will drop more expensive coins in certain regions. I have noticed though that I seem to get more of these by going ahead and chopping down some of the bushes. Maybe it was more chance, but yep, it still counted for the same thing for the bush walls. And since bush walls are so much easier to go ahead and craft and make a lot of, either build yourself a pen around a base so that you can trap the goblins inside like this, and then just keep chasing him around or try and block him in into an even smaller space so that you'll automatically pick up the coins when standing next to him. If you don't, he'll stop dropping them, so you can see here he's not dropping any, but as soon as I get close again he'll drop some more. If you don't pick up the coins that he's dropping, he'll pretty much take some of them back. And if you want to be really nefarious, you could absolutely trigger it and then go AFK while you go and grab your lunch and come back to hundreds, maybe even thousands of coins and currency. Now there are some good reasons to go ahead and kill these guys though. You will get a big amount of copper coins anyway, and maybe more importantly you do receive a heart that you can go ahead and increase your maximum health, but you will also be able to find these out in the world too. So make sure you use them up as soon as you've got them. Just put them into your hotbar and click the use button. You do also get a chance of finding some of the mana flowers which do the same job, increasing the amount of mana maximum points. I think it's worth at least doing this cheesy method a little bit the first time you come across one if you're lucky enough to trap it. Then you'll have gold to go ahead and buy a bunch of seeds from the farmer, or any other items that you like the look of if you come across other traders. If you press down on the D-pad on the controller, or whatever button it is on the keyboard, you should be able to see the housing and what you need to get some of these NPCs to come live with you. Some of them won't appear though until you've done certain actions. So, for example, just like I mentioned with the farmer, you may need to actually go ahead and till some ground, or go ahead and dig up some ground for it to spawn. So once you've chopped enough trees down, you should have plenty of grass seeds. These can be planted and they will grow into trees. So fairly early, make sure you pick up the hoe so that you can do this, till the ground, grow some crops, and that way the farmer will appear and you can get better crops to start to grow, which you'll need to make all sorts of other stuff. And it's a pretty obvious one, but you definitely want to plant as many of the seeds as quick as you can, as it takes a couple of in-game days for the trees to fully grow. And as said, a lot of stuff requires a fair amount of wood and stone, so you'll be quickly stripping the land of all its resources if you're not actually planting and growing more. You can also try building a moat. Once you get the shovel, you can dig up the ground around, and if you're near a river, you can expand it or add more so that you can really try and make your area a little bit more protected. But the best thing is to make sure you've got plenty of torches scattered all around your island or your area. But you don't want to be too scared in your base, as you will need to kill a bunch of the orcs that spawn more at night time to go ahead and get their hide or their leather. And I hate to say it, but if you see any cute bunny rabbits, yeah, go ahead and kill them, as that's another way to get hide early, which you'll need to go ahead and craft better armor and more. So I highly recommend you craft the boomerang as quickly as possible. To me, it was much better and easier to use than a wooden stick. And yeah, boomerangs are pretty good for early game. Don't be too quick to get off the beach also. This is something that I did. I ended up just wandering into a forest and starting my adventures a bit early. I totally missed out on healing potions. The starting beach zones are relatively easier to survive in, with usually only more slimes to deal with. But keep exploring until you start seeing some of the coral spawn as well as some of the starfish. You'll also need some of the seashells, as that's going to be useful for later as well. Starfish will give you the recipe to go ahead and make magic potions, and then the actual coral will give you the health potions. And for the potions, you are going to need sand to make glass. So I do believe it doesn't actually come from just digging up sand with a shovel in the beach. Instead, you've got to go to the desert and find the little sand piles. These can be dug up with any kind of tool, whether it's an axe or pickaxe, and you'll need lots of this to make lots of the glass. And of course you will need a cauldron, which you can only go ahead and craft from the crafting bench, and you may need one of the traders to appear before it might appear in the actual bench itself. So if you haven't come across a merchant yet, well, it's relatively early. It should be just appearing after the first few moments of the game, after you've gathered some resources. If not, make sure you've already got the guide in his own room in a base, and prep another room ready for the merchant. Now each one of the actual NPCs, they will go ahead and need certain requirements to live with you. But the basics that they all need are 9 floor pieces that are exactly the same and no others. So you can go ahead and have 9 wooden pieces and some stone, as long as at least 9 of them are exactly the same. Or at the very least, not forest or ground. Again, another reason to use bush walls, so you can save the wood for a lot of the other stuff, or stone. The game really does tell you this, so this feels just a bit stupid me having to explain it again. But all of them need a light source, so a torch, and then simply making sure there is walls around them with a doorway. In fact, you don't even need a doorway if you want to keep them imprisoned, but you're going to have a hard time buying any gear from them. So the minimum room should be 3 by 3 floor tiles and then walls all around it. Some NPCs may only want to live in certain biomes or have the certain type of ground. And then on top of that, each NPC will require a different type of crafting bench or maybe a table and chair. So the guide's simple enough, just put a crafting bench down. If you make any kind of mistake destroying a wall and he disappears, you can simply move him back in once you've repaired whatever went wrong. Rooms don't have to be square either, like I'm showing here. I've got a tiny little room for my guide, and then I've got this large room with a little annex for my bard. He needs a table and chair, so that's pretty simple. Once you've gone and crafted a furnace and cooked up some copper that you get from the desert, you should then hopefully have the blacksmith come by. He should start appearing also when you've gone and explored the desert for the first time. Also make sure you put the anvil down, and I'll talk about why that's really important for making good gear. The merchant just wants a simple chest, and pretty crucially you can buy a special pot from the actual merchant and go ahead and use it to make the farmer move in. You will be able to craft your own eventually, but that's going to involve more resources, so early game it's better just to go ahead and buy it. And then lastly, out of the starting NPCs, you've got the fisherman, who requires a large table and stool for moving in. And don't skip on fishing, even though it's one of my most hated things in games, you will be able a chance to get some kind of loot as well as fish. That'll be important for making all sorts of stuff as well. The minigame was a bit difficult at first until I realised what you got to do. Noting different water in different biomes will give you different type of loot that you can pick up. I highly recommend picking up the fishing accessories the first chance you can get from the fishing trader, as this will help with the little mini game. But in theory, you just need to get your line to be close to the fish as it swims and make sure the hook is really close to it. So it is a bit finicky and maybe a bit unforgiving, but eventually you will catch a fish. And if you've been lucky enough to see that there's some loot like the chest, then make sure you try and pick that up instead. If you're wondering why you can't make any food out of the crops that you've got, but you definitely have seen things like bread, which can double the amount of health you have for a while, well, you will need the chef, and then you'll need to go ahead and buy the cooking pot from him. As far as I'm aware, the chef was in the snow biome, so I don't think that's really changed since the demo. Another biome that you're going to have to be really prepared for by making yourself a hot drink, or you go ahead and buy them. You will not survive long at all if you go into the snow, and even being close enough once you get the debuff, it means it can still kill you. The order of exploration really is meant to be go through the beach, then the forest, then you head over to the desert, and then after that you may go and explore some of the snow, and then actually backtrack a little bit and go through some of the tougher regions in the desert, like the wastelands. And if you're lucky to find some of the swamps, then that's probably next afterwards. There are also secret caves that you can find that are their own biome too. Some resources you will not be able to go ahead and mine until you get better tools. That's pretty much an obvious in games like this. But one thing you can get early on, even with just stone tools, is some of the dead wood in the wastelands, as this will unlock a brand new building set. Pretty much desert wood, but yeah, it's slightly different from the regular wood. Be warned also that some of the other biomes, like the swamp, you've got more risk of perhaps getting poisoned, and so you'll need anti-poison potions to really survive long enough. And anytime you see this kind of haze on the biome, that pretty much means you're in a spot where you don't necessarily have the right kind of protection. So it should serve as a warning that yeah, maybe you should go and get some other stuff. Once you start to build up a good collection of money, you may want to think about trying to buff your weapons. Now this is a bit risky, as you can actually get debuffs and make some of your gear worse. Once you've met the blacksmith, you should be able to go ahead and reforge items. Depending on the item, it might cost more or less currency, and you'll either increase or decrease its base stats, but you can also increase or give new abilities or debuffs. So it's a bit risky, like I said. I'm honestly not too sure if maybe better weapons have a better chance of getting better buffs, but as you can see, I literally made my stone axe worse here. But it probably is worth it if you've got enough coins to go ahead and try it at least a few times, and you may get really lucky. You can always reforge the same item as well. So instead of having 30% less damage and speed, I now gain 50% extra critical chance. But I still think it's worth taking the risk, especially on some of the weapons that you've been using a lot of. One last thing with NPCs, actually scroll all the way down. They don't always have them listed in the order. You can find some if at the bottom, so this is why you might be missing seeing what you need to actually get them to move in. Just a quick tip that I thought of just there. And that's pretty much it for a very basic starter guide. Of course, there's lots to talk about with the enemies in the desert, what kind of loot you can find, but some of that will be pretty self-explanatory. You'll come across places with lots of chests that'll have lots of potions and stuff. And once you get to the snow biome and you've got the ability to get the cooking pot, you can then craft lots of foods, and that gives you even more buffs. So it's all about unlocking these NPCs, get them to live with you so that you can always buy stuff from them to pretty much help you progress to the next biome and gather new resources. Yeah, the main biome to explore is the desert once you get the buff from the bard, so you can get plenty of copper and sand. And I'm going to have a slight spoiler right now about the boss, so if you don't want to watch the first one that you might encounter out of maybe the 12 to 15 that are in the game, just some tips if you do, because it's pretty tough I think, especially if you've only just about started to get a basic build. But thanks a lot for watching if you're going now, and I'll see you RATBAGGERS for more Tinkerlands guides and more. So the Slime King has got potentially a chance to drop almost any time, although I'm sure there's some markers that say it can't until you've got a certain amount of resources gathered. But basically he'll appear randomly unless you go ahead and summon it by killing lots of the slimes, and with 50 of the mucus that you can get, you can go ahead and craft a summoning idol for it. This or a crab boss are more than likely the first two bosses that you'll come across. And honestly, it's pretty tough. It doesn't matter what kind of base you build, it will be able to go ahead and just jump into it. Hence why it's not really worth it building out of wood or stone. Not until you're really ready to get lots of resources with better tools. And ideally, you definitely want ranged weapons to take this guy on. I found that magic overall isn't a great kind of fit at the moment. It seems way underpowered until you can get a massive mana bar by using the flowers. And especially look out for the ability to craft something called a pea shooter. It only requires lots of leaves as ammo. You should see it unlock once you've crafted a bunch of other weapons and gear. It doesn't do much damage, but it does fire arrows, or these little pea shoots, a lot quicker than the regular bow. Slime King has got a ton of health, and he's got a fair couple stages where he'll shoot at you when he lands. And these can be pretty tough to dodge, hence why you might want to try keeping him at bay with ranged weapons. However, my actual boomerang wasn't doing as much as I wanted, and I remembered that I had found a trident weapon exploring one of the biomes. This did a lot more damage, and with the help of some actual healing potions, I just about killed it before it killed me. So yeah, something to bear in mind with this guy. You can't really avoid it. If it comes, if you do die while fighting it, it will disappear. And so any idols that you've crafted to summon him will actually be a waste. But your big reward is, like I said at the start of the video, the compass that can reset the map. And I managed to get a critical jelly pistol, which seems pretty OP once I get enough mucus to use as ammo. It's well worth trying to farm and kill him again though, because you're looking for a moustache accessory that he can drop, which gives you a 50% more chance of item drops. And there is also a chance it can drop a jelly sword if you like melee weapons better. I'm really enjoying this game. I'm going to be putting a ton more time into it, so that I've got lots of guides ready for you guys, especially for the biomes and the other bosses we're going to encounter. So hopefully you found it useful. If you subscribe, make sure you got a notification bell dinged to get notifications when I go live, and I'll see you RATBAGGERS for more soon.